we're continuing our look at DMC. But this time, it's the more modern game's turn. This is another step closer to check out those big hitters. Been working on this one for a while, just collecting my thoughts on this since the channel began. Nothing too serious. Just had to take all my random notes to form some sense of my ramblings. That'll be a common thing going forward with these titans of our genre, by the way. So hopefully, they turn out alright. This is Combat Overview. Here we go over the general controls and the mechanics, what we use them on, and then seeing how it all comes together. Before we really get started, we're just going to skim past the pure basics and keep things simple. It's the plan anyways, because we've looked at this series pretty closely as it is. So I'll try my best to only focus on what's new, any massive changes worth pointing out, and just drop my opinions on it as we get there. So I won't get super technical and in-depth with the back half of the trilogy. That sort of thing has been done for many years and thoroughly documented. But best believe I'll go over enemies and bosses since that's my favorite part. Alright, so Nero makes his debut here. Straightforward character with a very solid kit. And to start things off, his main sword of choice, the Red Queen. And I won't lie, it's up there as a favorite of mine. Goes right up there with Alistair. Now what's so interesting about it is the rev mechanic, which lets us ready up a few charges. And they'll stay there too, they won't go away until you attack. So it's entirely up to you when to use them. Does take time to prep, but it'll give your attacks more damage, think they attack faster too, and even alters a few moves like Streak and High Roller, which is pretty cool. Now it might seem a bit risky to do this, revving our blade during battle, but with the use of Exceed, we can instantly charge a single pip of our EX gauge. To do this, we need to time our rev during specific windows of our attacks. This can be done with any of them. Can be in the middle of a combo, could be done on hit, or even if you whiff. It'll still work just as long as you time your Exceed. So it becomes this sort of rhythm-based minigame. And the better you get, you can do something called max hacked. It requires pinpoint accuracy though, but it's awesome to pull off. Even if it's random at times, well for me it is anyways. Don't think it's necessary to build this insane level of muscle memory to make him work, but as you get the feel for it, it becomes something that fires you up to master it the best you can. It's a mechanic built for those intrinsically motivated players. Now his gun, the Blue Rose, is a cannon, especially the charge shot. It's insanely good, especially when you get it to level 3. Great range obviously, staggers everything, does massive damage, there's an explosion afterwards that can also hit nearby enemies, and floors them too. Now to get the most of it, remap your gun to a trigger. I know everyone says this, but it's for good reason. Lets you more comfortably hold down the shoot button to let it charge in the background, while still having complete access to all your face buttons. Doing this makes it so you don't have to play with a claw grip, pretty much. So definitely think about it, because it gives an enormous amount of value when you get used to it. Now the Devil Bringer, this thing is awesome. Well, everything Nero has is fun to use, but yeah, this thing just eliminates any downtime. And that's because it pulls enemies in. It doesn't matter if you're grounded or airborne, as long as you're locked on, it'll yank them towards you. If they're light enough anyways. But if you drop your lock on, Snatch will turn into your Buster. It's this close range grab that'll automatically pummel before doing a little throw. You can hold it instead to use them as a shield, but I never use this. Unfortunately, there's no iframes on these unique throw animations, so don't think of this as beat 'em ups because they're easily interrupted since there's no iframes or even armor. So you need to use these more carefully. Now I've said this many times, but we don't need all these weapons and a laundry list of moves to make a fun character. It's always best to have quality over quantity, where every move has its purpose, or at least fills some niche. Shinobi had one sword and a straightforward combo, with 2 enders. Might seem simple on paper, but the game has us use that in so many ways. And when combined with the movement, shurikens, and enemy placements, the level of decision making becomes very deep and involved. So I wouldn't say Nero is limited or feels like half a character. That couldn't be further from the truth, because with what's here, he has a very engaging kit like no other. Onto defenses, as per usual with DMC games, it's pretty light. Jump still has iframes on the way up, and is our main option to avoid attacks. Roll is still a thing, but I never used it once. Even on my DMD run, it made no appearances, so you won't be missing out on much if you forget about it. Looking at the HUD, we got our health that can be upgraded by finding blue shards, doing secret missions, or buying a few from the shop. The blue pips underneath is our DT. Won't get this till later on, but there's an initial cost to use it, drains over time, doesn't give hyper armor like Dante's. You don't get heals either from what I can tell, but you deal more damage, get increased attack speed, adds multi-hits, can spawn floating daggers, and improves those buster grabs. And of course, it has iframes on activation. But it also does this short-ranged explosion that launches nearby enemies. It actually works somewhat like Drive Forms in Kingdom Hearts 2, so it can be used in the same way as we did there. Can cancel attacks mid-animation, extend our pressure, crowd control, and yeah, it's safe to say that Nero has a pretty damn good DT. I have to bring this up because I'm glad they thought about it, but everything carries over between characters. So that upgraded HP and DT meters are shared, and every single red orb and proud soul you ever spent is given to Dante, along with whatever you had saved up too. So you'll be able to start off with a few goodies. And well, here's what I'd recommend. For Nero, buy Combo C and Roulette Spin, so we can get the most out of each opening. Streak 1 at least, since it's such a fundamental part of our kit. All 3 charge shots for sure. Sooner the better because it's kind of broken. And extending the range of snatches is always a plus. So get these first and then chip away at the rest, like more slots for the EX gauge, Trigger Heart to slow DT depletion, and Maximum Bet can come later since it's only used for 2 bosses, but it's still great to have for repeat playthroughs. For Dante, buy Stinger 1 and 2, same reasons as before. All 3 charge shots for Coyote, since it's pretty useful on a lot of enemies, kinda underrated. And since we can buy each style level now, get that Swordmaster maxed out. Aerial Wave is great early on. Dance Macabre, or Macabre, has its uses as well. But we really want Drive to be the best it can be with its extra charges and those triple blade beams. And we'll see why later on. And oh yeah, speed and air hike for both characters is a must. And that's really it. This is all I ever use to take down each difficulty, even DMD. Everything else is just kinda extra. The game is a lot more straightforward than you might think. So don't be too intimidated by it. Just stick to the basics, and that'll get you very far. When it comes to enemies, I've heard the criticism that they were designed for Nero and Nero alone, then Dante here just has to fumble about. But I think that's far from the truth, because if you play the series, many of these are from DMC1, and the others are pretty similar to past archetypes. So as we go through these, it's pretty cool how we can connect the dots. Scarecrows, they're the most basic grunts of the game, so you can do whatever you want without much pushback. They do have little swipes, but both characters can just clear a room full of them without an issue. Mega Scarecrows are no different. They have immediate hit stun, so you can swing away for free. And since they're mega sized, it only makes locking them down even easier. It's not till way higher difficulties do a spin attack, but they're pushovers otherwise. Just watch out for that massive blade of theirs, because once defeated, it'll be tossed up, then fall down right where they died. So don't stick around there for too long. Mephisto is a clear callback to the Sin Scissors from DMC1, being this flying enemy that can phase through walls. So similar to those guys, it's not the best idea to swat at them with your melee weapons, because they're just too mobile to land hits consistently. Plus they have this protective cloak that acts as a shield in a way, because while they have this intact, you can't deal direct damage, or as much of it. Sort of like Shadows in DMC1. And just like Shadows, we want to expose their weak point. The best way to do that is with far range attacks. And Nero having Snatch, yeah, makes this pretty easy to do. You can jump and try to line up Buster, which really tears through it. But again, since they're so nimble, it'll most likely whiff, then you need to deal with a downtime to try again. So I just keep my feet on the ground to do repeat Snatch to chip away at it while prepping up charge shots. They do attack, so don't just smash. So when it does this spin around you, be ready to jump. They also have this skewer attack similar to Shadows. Won't be a surprise either because they'll fly around you and there's a noticeable audio visual cue to go along with it. We can jump to iframe through it, but sadly, you can't land on it like the Shadows. It's possible to clash parry, but yeah, that doesn't open them up for a critical kill like Sin Scissors. Would have been awesome to see that mechanic make a return here, but maybe next time. Anyways, once exposed, now is our chance to take them out. Don't need to do anything complicated. Combo C is my go-to starter, into a launcher followed by roulette spin, you yank them in for a buster, and I should have a charge shot ready to go by the time my throw finishes. As Dante, I'll use a shotgun. We found it in the same room where we countered Sin Scissors and won, So it was their counter back then, and it still is here. So we want to get in close and fire away. In my experience, you shoot a lot faster in the air too, so air hike and enemy step will help keep up the pressure. Oh, if you charge a shotgun, yeah, this will only speed up the process. Once exposed, can do a standard combo, launch an area rave, can use a grounded auto combo on Swordmaster, or distortion real impact to get rid of them right then and there. Now that I think about it, this is pretty similar to how we dealt with Blood Goyles in 3. Shoot him down and keep him still, then we move in to get rid of him for good. There's an advanced version called Faust. They have a few more options. Guess they're the synthesize of the game. Nothing different on what we need to do with either character. Just need to be more cautious of the longer ranged with their new claws. If they go through a wall, they won't stay there long because they'll quickly come back with a swoop. So be sure to jump soon after. Assaults. Well, here's one of our first returning enemies from 1. Alright, if you're too far away, they'll fire off projectiles to chip at you. We'll also jump in the air to do a few back and forth swoops, or they will dive into the ground to burrow their way towards you before leaping out with an attack. They still have their shield to break through, but with Nero's charge shots and Buster, yeah, it doesn't stick around for too long. So you can bully these guys as Nero, as long as you keep an eye out. Well, since Dante fought these guys before, it's not too far off from what we did back then, which means Stinger does amazing work against them, breaks their shield, and will also send them toppling away, especially the shotgun. So my go-to setups from back then still work here. Jump towards them and use that up-close blast to send them face first into the dirt. Unfortunately, there's no critical kill mechanic, so we can't attack their weak spot for an instant kill. But once they're knocked down, they can no longer be moved. So we can't launch them, but they also can't be sent flying either. Basically, we can land whatever we want, and they just have to tank the hits. You can just spam Stinger if you want, can do Dance Macabre or Macabre, or use a standard combo. They're all fine to do because we're able to jump cancel out of them. And that's the point because as soon as they begin to stand up, just shotgun them point blank again, which sets up this sort of loop. And it's not bad to crowd control nearby enemies with this. You can even cancel with Prop Shredder since it's such an active hitbox. So it'll catch the wake up, launching them so we can follow up with an area rave and yeah, let them take them out with ease once we lock them down with this. Chimeras. This is when normal enemies like assaults or scarecrows get taken over by chimera seeds. So there's an extra layer of defenses we need to keep an eye out. With Nero, I rely on charge shots, jumps, and snatch. Guns to crowd control, especially with fully charged, because of the explosion, right? And snatch to single out a single enemy to Buster for solid damage. This is all you need to do with them, really. That and have some decent range between them. For Dante, same game plan. We want to have some distance at the start, but since they're a variant of assaults most times, the use of shotgun can help a lot to keep him at bay as you'd expect. Lucifer is really solid too since it will trench him with pins for you to detonate all at once, which can hit nearby enemies. Now if things really get out of hand, do Stinger while in DT. It just pierces through a crowd, dealing solid damage and kind of resets the situation. Uses a lot of meter, but it's there if needed. Now a little detail you should look out for, once you deal enough damage with firearms, they wilt away, going from fully colored to black, letting you know they're stunned, which means you can safely approach for a brief moment and they won't flail around to protect their host. They eventually come back though. My go-to for this is the shotgun, what a surprise. And yeah, you can go back to the basics on how we dealt with assaults as before. Now from what I've heard, this is probably one of the most hated enemies in the game, but I don't mind these guys. And that's because they actually fight back and has us adapt, as all good enemies do. So with the help of Chimera Seeds, these grunt enemies are no longer weak to the basic strategies as before, where they're completely vulnerable to all sorts of the setups they have no way to fight back. But that's why this enemy exists, to flip that idea on its head. Now there's a simpler way around it, nothing too crazy, once we stop to see what's actually happening. And you know what? Chimeras are no different than shadows in a way, because it's a very similar situation on how they're set up. So if you went into their fight to do some mindless smashing, you'll soon find out that won't get you far. It will only get you hit every single time. I think that's smart because it sets this precedent very early on that we need to actually slow down and play a bit more calculated. This sort of enemy design reminds me of telling a kid to not touch fire because it'll burn you. So can keep banging your head against the wall by mashing against these chimeras. Just don't expect to get away without a scar or two. But once you learn how to turn off their figurative fire, you realize how silly it was to complain about it burning you every time you got too close. Frost. Yep, another returning enemy. And just like DMC1, they will show up in pairs most, if not every time. They also have quite a lot of hyper armor and move around a good bit. Might seem like it's a lot to deal with, but they have quite a few moments we can take advantage of, especially with Buster. So when they're knocked down, either from launchers or with that explosion from level 3 charge shots, we can follow up with a Buster grab. When they teleport towards you to close the distance, or when they leave the ice cocoon of theirs, they're easy pickings for a Buster as well. If we really want to play it safe, you can jump in Fish with Snatch. Not only does it avoid their classic high jump attack that creates those nearby icicles on landing, but it gives you some extra leeway to interrupt one of their attacks and pull them in to land a few hits. As Dante, same stuff to look out for, and using the shotgun, stinger, and prop shredder are ways to punish those openings of theirs so you can deal some solid damage afterwards. Or maybe even set up a distortion from impact, if possible. Cutlass are these sharks with bladed fins. They show up in crowds of 3 and will surround you every time. As they swim about, their main move is to dive, set themselves beneath you, before jumping out to attack. But as long as you keep an eye out for that puddle closing in, you should be able to avoid it. For Nero, charge shots works like a charm, of course, just exploding them out of the ground so you can wail on them. Snatch can work too, yanking them out of there, and just flip-flop between those two. For Dante, while he doesn't have a nuke to instantly hit those enemies, and doesn't have a far-range grab to stop them from swimming away. So it can be tricky at first on how to approach him. But since their attacks leave him airborne, my go-to strat is to jump and anti-air them with the shotgun, usually charged. It's something we could have done to stop Frost back in 1, so it's cool to see that it's still useful here. But yeah, you need time to jump for those iframes to avoid that rising attack of theirs. Not only that, but it will get us to their level, lining us up to land a big enough hit to knock them down. Then you can do whatever you feel like. And being in DT will only make this a lot easier with the extra damage and hyper armor Dante gets, right? So try that if they're really giving you some trouble. Gladius are these flying swords that swarm the room. For Nero, it's incredibly simple. Just snatch, then Buster. That's all you need to do. For Dante, it won't be as easy compared to Nero, but it's still pretty doable without much hassle. Since they're brittle flying enemies, I approach these guys as if they were skulls from DMC1. Just jump and blast them away with that shotgun. This will either instant kill or it'll knock them down for a good while for you to follow up. Now when we get close, don't use a basic attack, it'll send them away from you. Instead, use stingers. That leaves them stuck on the floor for us to repeat these over and over. And by the way, stingers no longer have end lag like 3. It's back to the glory days of DMC1. So spam away. Basilisks are these fire dogs, which are pretty straightforward. They either fire a single fireball while standing, or they jump and then fire a single fireball at you. That's pretty much it. They have a clear tail beforehand, having their whole head glow, and they're easily tossed around with stingers, launchers, and guns. Which means Nero can do whatever the hell he wants, and it'll work. Dante is no different really. Timer jumps to avoid attacks, just like Nero. Stinger and shotgun to spread them out, just like Nero. And enemies don't attack off screen, so this can help too. Angelos. Okay, now these guys are awesome. So the first kind we'll encounter are called Bianco Angelos. And as you can tell, they have a giant shield, which means if you mash on their guard, they'll parry and answer back with a counter. It's no different than Fetish from DMC1 in that way. And same thing, as long as you can react in time, you can jump out of the way to dodge their bash if you find yourself attacking the shield a little too much. So, with Nero, you can honestly just think of them as Dullahans from DMC3. So to avoid their lance from poking us, to not have that shield be a problem, we want to jump over them as soon as we can, get to their exposed back. And since there is usually a crowd nearby, waiting to attack you, I'll do a launcher to single this target out. Very fundamental stuff. But yeah, since the chances of being interrupted are super low up here, I'll go for a Buster to deal solid damage. And if you have a charge shot, then fire away to finish them off if they survived. And if they didn't, that charge shot would just go to someone else to make your landing a bit more safe. And oh yeah, you can keep tapping Buster during those grab animations to extend them. You can do this on a few enemies to deal more damage, which is pretty cool. As Dante, just need to make your way behind them. From here, they're vulnerable to launchers like Prop Shredder, High Time, and so on. Then once they're floored, you can land a few hits. They're easy pickings for setting up Distortion Real Impact. You definitely get some good practice by dealing with these guys in this way. Now there's a more advanced version called Alto Angelo. Instead of a single stab, they have a little combo with the sword. And just like the regular version, their main approach is with their rush attack. Their wings expand and you can clearly see the thrusters before boosting towards you. So just jump to avoid it. And when they fly around, can shock them out of the air, and even Prop Shredder can swat them down if they're close enough. And then again, Gopher's Distortion will impact. But what makes them so damn cool is the fact Altos order the Biancos into different formations. So they regroup, will either set up a phalanx, or rush you down in waves, or surround you, or my favorite, when there's at least 2 lesser Angelos around, they'll prep this energy ball. Takes a little build up, but if you catch on, you can reflect it. Nero's charge shot can reflect it with relative ease, since Nero fires off a massive hitbox, so don't worry, it doesn't require some pinpoint timing. And for Dante, you can toss the Rose when using Lucifer. Definitely the coolest between the two, but yeah, it's easy anyway to reflect since it's just this flying active hitbox. Prop Shredder can work, but with this stubby range, it became more of a hit or miss kind of thing when I try to use it. Now, if swapping to Lucifer and Swordmaster on the fly is a bit much, a regular shot from Pandora will work too. Blitz. These guys are a menace because they hit hard, move around a lot, and you don't want to touch them because you'll take damage for that, just like you know who. So they have this electric shield you need to break down first before we can move in. Okay, since he's extremely evasive, just teleporting all over the place, we need to wait for him to attack because that's the only opening we have. It's brief, but we can make it work. So as we wait for this, we're charging our gun. And if you have level 3 unlocked as you should, it'll tear. And when that electricity is finally removed, pop DT and just do busters over and over again. He has no way out of this loop from my experience, so keep it up. And don't forget to mash the fire button as well for those extra daggers. Now when he reaches critical health, he'll go into this desperation phase, turning red and becoming even more crazy if you can believe it. Fighting Blitz as Dante is pretty fun too. And well, I kinda just stand still and wait. So as I wait for him to reappear, I'll jump to shoot away as usual. And it might seem hard to react so consistently to these fast attacks, but all I do is look out for his bolt to get anywhere near the floor, because there's a high chance he'll attack in this spot since you're on the same level as him. So it kinda baits him for an easy shot to land. Now when comparing back-to-back jumps, it'll only make Blitz go into these weird spots we can't do much with. So stay on the ground, keep an eye out for that placement, jump and fire away. Soon enough, we'll get him into that staggered state. From here, I just get in close and do 3 or 4 sets of pins. Once placed, I detonate and repeat. They hardly move other than this little shuffle, but most times they kind of just sit there for us to set these up. There's also a beam attack they like to do sometimes. Blitz will stand still before sending out this lingering beam, followed by some sweeps. He stands completely still, so I just use this to set up some even more pins. And when I have to jump out of the way, I fire away with a shotgun. Since I use it a lot against Blitz, Lucifer wasn't this mystical, unapproachable thing, but it's pretty straightforward. You just place pins in front of you. You can decide if you want them to surround your enemy, or yourself with Swordmaster, then on command, blow them up all at once. I guess it's kind of similar to the needle gun from Halo, but yeah, there's no need to make it more complicated than that, really. I'm actually kind of surprised just how easy it was to pick up and use when coming back to this game. So if I can make sense of it, then you guys can definitely make it work too. Boss fights are pretty solid, especially the very first one, Burial. Really fun fight, one of my favorites in the entire series now. Hot take, but I think it's better than Credo. Strong words, I know, but maybe you'll see where I'm coming from. As Nero, you want to start the fight with a level 3 charge shot, pop DT, and set up maximum bet. It is a double trigger exclusive move, which means you won't have this till way later. But when you do the boss rush near the end of the game, or if you go through NG+, this is an amazing opener you definitely want to do. Alright, for the longest time, I really felt like I had to be in the air for most of the fight, but nah, that's overthinking it. A more grounded approach would do the job just fine. So as long as we're close up, we only need to look out for 3 moves most times. When he leans over and crosses his arm, he'll do a lunging vertical attack. So just move to the side by running or a single jump. Sometimes he'll guard for a while. Just watch out because he'll follow up with a low horizontal sweep. So it gives us a free opening to land roulette spin. Now he will do the occasional quick swipe and stomps to get you off him, but they're very low damage. So it's fine if they scratch you, but it's a good idea not to mash so you can avoid them. Now, most if not every boss has this invisible stagger meter because once we deal enough damage, they be put into this stunned state, which leaves them wide open for any attack we want. And that's where Nero's Buster plays a massive role, because it lets us land these very cool Buster grabs. So here, you want to pop DT, jump to the face, and grab to deal massive damage. Once that's over, quickly make your way to his face again as he's still grounded because we'll have enough time to do another Buster as he's trying to get back up. Kinda destroys his health. For Dante, same thing. As soon as the fight begins, ready up a fully charged drive, and be sure to send out 3 blade beams. Now we want to do a few well-placed aerial waves. Don't stay up here for too long, because we want to be able to avoid his attacks the best we can. So get in a few hits and see what he does next, which are low sweeps and quick swipes most times, which gets us a good opening to hit his face again. He also has an explosion to really get you away. Both Trickster or by popping DT with Nero, you can iframe through it. Guess you can see why I like this boss so much. It's just a non-stop back and forth fight with all sorts of moves to look out for. And yeah, once he falls over, this is the perfect chance to ready up Distortion Real Impact. So yeah, Dante has this thing too. Bale and Dagon. You want to be on the side of him at all times, because his moves only attack in front of him. Will either be Ice Breath to cover the floor, shards of ice from above near his face, and this forward leap to eat you. So keep repositioning and swipe away as you ready up a level 3 charge shot. Sometimes he'll do a body flop attack, but you can chain iframes by jumping away into DT just in case. Eventually, he tries to run away by jumping all the way to the back corner. He wants to go back into hiding, but we'll have a good amount of time to land some big damage. So, pop DT, ready up max bet, and then follow up with a level 3 charge shot, as always. Now when those girls land, you can land a guaranteed snatch into Buster Grab, fire off a level 3 charge shot, and streak. Doing these all at once does a really good job to skip this phase altogether, having the boss jump back into the arena. But if things don't work out like that, just smash stingers. Surprisingly, they don't dodge this because they'll dodge everything else with these. So just do these instead. And of course, when he's staggered, pop DT and go in for that grab. As Dante, again, don't stay in front of him for too long because of those forward attacks. So he wants to stay on the sides and spam stinger. Extremely low end lag, so we can do this very quickly to set up a stagger. Doing this in DT will only make this easier. But yeah, once he's stunned, just walk up for an easy distortional impact. Again, we might not have a cool grab like Nero, but Dante has his own way to deal massive damage in no time. And when he jumps away to the corner, we have enough time to ready up max charge drive to deal a solid amount of damage before he disappears. And when those girls drop in, spam stinger to tear through him too. Yeah, he's kind of a pushover for both of them. Even on DMD you can get away with this honestly, so it should be pretty straightforward. Containment Room is a Nero exclusive boss. So the whole idea of this fight is to grab a Gladius and chuck him at the window. Pretty cool idea to use enemies against other enemies. Not only that, but it puts a lot of focus on one of his main mechanics, which I like to see. Think of Rising Revengeance, how one boss was all about parries, or another one was all about the blade mode. Stuff like that, you know? But yeah, since they fill the room, we need to keep an eye out on where they're at and what they're about to do. Luckily, they have clear tells for us. Now sometimes there will be more than 3 prepping to hit us, but once I notice this, hang back. Because I could grab and throw one at either one, but the third will still be there to clip me during the animation. So I'll time my jump for those iframes and then pop DT to extend that even further. Honestly, don't be too stingy with DT because it has you deal extra damage, and just throwing a single sword at the window will give you a good amount of meter back, a noticeable amount. And just like in past games, popping DT will escape hit stun too, so it can help you bounce back a lot sooner, especially with the amount of enemies waiting to follow up. Forgot to mention, we're surrounded by this electrified floor. So not only do we need to keep track of every enemy on screen, we also need to watch our footing to not take extra chip damage from the stage hazard. There's a few moving parts to manage. Now I know this boss is seen as dumb, but I like when we're given these different concepts for a fight. It keeps things interesting. For Echidna, it's not a bad idea to go into the air against her. Her main attack you'll see is a sweep, so we'll be able to avoid it just by being up here already. She can do this hair whip up close, But after how many times I fought her, I've seen it less than 5 times, so you rarely have to worry about that. So Nero, we want to rev as much as we can and fully charge our gun as we start the fight. Okay, as soon as it begins, fire away. Once we're getting close, just do roulette spin and repeat until we fall back down. Once we're getting close, just do roulette spin. You can do about 3 until we fall back down. And be sure to prep your charge shot at all times during this. General rule of thumb for every fight really, but you'll get used to it eventually. After some time, she'll fly off and come back with some different forms. If she splits her tail into these separate tendrils, she'll spawn 1 or 2 enemies, nothing we can't handle. But you can jump up there and buster grab to deal some solid damage. Now if she plants herself, just walk up to her and do regular combos. Try your best with those timed exceeds, and fire off charge shots whenever they're good to go, as usual. Keep this up until we put her into that stagger state. Pop DT if you have the meter, and go in for the buster grab. Now for her fight only, mashing rev during these busters will do more damage. I've tested this on a few other bosses, but nothing happens. So it's pretty cool how she has her unique mechanic. But you can mash the fire button as well for those blade beams while in that DT to attack even more damage. So be ready to flick back and forth between the two. For Dante, he's the first major boss we fight, so we won't have much other than Rebellion. So, Sword Master and Aerial Raves it is. So just repeat Aerial Raves, and with Air Hike too, this lets us land as many attacks as possible. Also, when she starts to fly away, if you can make your way to the gate, you'll be fine. She never flies through the gate, so you can use this as a safe spot. But yeah, if she sets up that umbrella thingy, I guess, you can do the same Aerial Raves, or double jump onto her instead. Going into DT will give a 3rd jump for the extra height if needed. But yeah, once you're up here, she has no real way to fight back, so just slash away. And when she plants herself in the middle, pop DT and do regular Rebellion combos. That's more than enough to make this count. And remember, we also have Hype Armor while in DT, so we'll be fine to keep attacking when those things try to hit us away. Now, when we fight her again, try to use Lucifer a bit more, especially when she plants herself. Get up close and just pin. It's death by a million cuts sort of deal. Because with how many toss out, it adds up, especially in DT. So it's not a bad idea to do this if you have the meter. Also, she'll glow gold eventually. It's her powered up phase when near death. A lot of these bosses have some sort of desperation phase at this point of the fight actually, which adds new moves or alters the regular ones, which is pretty cool. Now that I think about it, Blitz has all the same stuff going on, so he might as well be considered a boss too. Credo. What you want to do is get up close. Do not attack. He will parry and quickly answer back. So instead, we're just there to force a reaction from him. He has 2 combos. Each have their own unique startup animation, but we don't need to worry about him. Just walk away to create some space, wait for the last attack, time with forward jump to iframe through it, and you'll be able to punish him soon after. We don't have a lot of wiggle room, since he'll escape your combo if you try to get too fancy, so let's keep things simple. So, just hit him once to make sure we start a combo, launch, and then buster. Once he's sent flying, follow up with that classic level 3 charge shot. And that's all you need to do. It's pretty simple. You can probably see why. I think Burial is a better fight in comparison, but I can't forget to mention the famous spear counter. So you can catch it mid-air with your buster to send it back. Yeah, it's always hype to see that. You know, I really like how the buster works in this game. How it's able to counter Echidna, Sanctus, Credo, and so on. All those cool interactions make these guys extremely fun to fight. It gave me that same feeling when I learned about critical kills for the first time. Simple in concept, but it adds another layer to enemy design you would have never thought existed. But once you do, it gives you something to aim for. To try that yourself, you know? Which goes a long way to excite players to go back for one more playthrough to put that extra knowledge to use. Agnes, his whole gimmick is to summon backup to fill the room. Kinda reminded me of that snake boss from Shinobi at times. But yeah, Nero wants to get in his face and never let up. Mainly because Agnes has no attacks to defend himself. What he has is 2-hit combo made up of very slow swipes that can be seen from a mile away. He also has a command grab he might use on the rare occasion, but most times he just wants to create space and relies on summon to fight for him instead. So, when he summons those swords, just stick to the basics. Jump and pop DT. Get those iframes, deal more damage, and adds multi-hits. so we'll be able to destroy them before they become an issue since he hovered there for a good while. Just keep this up, doing roulette spin until he staggers. Once he starts taking his stun, that's your cue to go in. Pop DT and Buster for massive damage. And as a reminder, always mash your gun because you'll spawn those daggers to deal extra damage during those throws. And if you see him fly to the middle, make sure to knock him out of it because he heals. And during his DM, he'll start to spin Cutlass. Does massive damage, but we can time our jumps and pop DT to chain iframe so we can really get out of there safely. For Dante, the opener is up to you, but if you can, just beeline towards him and immediately set up a distortion will impact. Like I said, he's defenseless most times since he relies on summons, right? Well, since the room is as empty as it's going to get at the start, it's kind of the best chance we got to do some really big damage. But yeah, other than that, it's the similar stuff. So when he's about to summon Gladius, pop DT, swap to Swordmaster, and Aerial Wave. Pretty much all we gotta do for this fight. Lets us avoid those enemies below that he summoned, and we do consistent damage with little interruption, especially in DT since the hyper armor. He does move around to try to get away, but back-to-back stingers let us keep the pressure up until he stands still again, so we can go back to Aerial Waves. And for that desperation move, quickly double jump out of there and use Trickster to be extra safe. This attack gets more and more dangerous the higher the difficulty, so it's best to get used to it now before you start climbing. Now when Nero has to fight Dante, man, it bums me out just how meh it was, because it could have been so much better. The main issue with him is that he doesn't work like Virgil from EMC3, for example, where we're given clear opportunities to punish him after he attacks so we can land a guaranteed punish. So after Judgment Cut, Stinger, or Helmbreaker, if we dodge it properly, we could actually land a few hits after that. But Dante doesn't follow those same rules, sadly. He cancels attacks mid-animation, probably because he's clearly reading input, which is funny, but he constantly stops anything he does and answers back perfectly. So he has no way for us to play around his attacks like we could Virgil so many years ago. Now, once I thought about it, like what makes a good boss or just enemy work well is end lag. Enemies with immediate hit stun can be mashed on for free either way, but when it comes to hyper armor like Goros from Shooter H4, or if they could parry mid combo like Fetish from DMC1, hell, end lag even makes the input reading rival fight from Shinobi possible to beat. In all those cases, if we could catch on to what they're doing and get around the options properly, we were rewarded with a guaranteed punish every time. And that's because they had downtime to what they tossed out, so we could actually respawn. It seems so simple, but that's what makes it so important, right? It's a foundational thing that needs to be there so we can have those satisfying back and forth fights. That's why Nello Angelo, Virgil, and Credo are highly regarded all these years later. It's not just the awesome movesets of theirs, but it's because they're still fair. They require a level of skill and enemy knowledge that makes it rewarding to learn and interact with on all levels. Tangent aside, well, since Dante has no legit way to take him down, we need to rely on cheese. So if you shoot your gun and walk up while doing that, it locks Dante to do the same, letting us safely move in to use Buster. This works on every difficulty. It's the only way I got past him on DMD. So have no shame to use this, because he is a badly designed boss when compared to the greats in the series. Sucks too because he starts to use more and more styles and weapons the further you get into his fight. Could have been fun to figure each of these out, but it just didn't work out that way. The Savior. It's the only exclusive boss to Dante. And yeah, of course I like this boss. And that's because it's basically the second phase of the Mundus fight from DMC1. Having to do platforming as we swat away at this massive statue-like being. But here in DMC4, it expands on that. So on specific limbs, there's gems that we need to break, since they're basically his weak points. Guess you can think of it as the Oogie fight in Kingdom Hearts 1. Same idea here. Now, as much as I enjoy this fight for being different than the rest, this different approach can lead to a few pitfalls that can make it frustrating. Because it's our first time going up against something like this, right? So, it can get messy. So I spent a lot of time, and I really do mean a lot, to find a consistent strategy to make this smooth as possible. Okay, as soon as the fight begins, do not move. Instead, lock on and set up a level 2 drive, followed by 3 blade beams. Savior won't move for a bit at the start, so we'll be able to set this up with no problem. Now doing this will do a guaranteed knockdown. It even works on DMD surprisingly. From here, just follow where I go and destroy these gems with a shotgun. Gets rid of them pretty quick. Now when we jump onto this platform, and Angelo is waiting for us. I can manage to break the one gem on the far right, but by the time I land, he'll close in soon after. He could be a slight inconvenience, but just launch with whatever you want to keep him busy. Then make your way to the far ledge, swap to pistols, pop DT for that armor and extra damage, and then aim for the gem on his head. You're going to have to swap your lock on, which can be a little finicky, but you'll be able to chip away at it in no time. Now, after we destroy that gem on his head, we'll be moved to the second phase of the fight, where we need to break the remaining ones on each shoulder and the one on his back. Okay, what we do depends entirely on which of the 3 different spawns we get. Well, I think there is. From the many times I tested things out, I got these all the time. Anyways, if there's only one jump pad on the right, just follow it to reach this machine. Activate it to send out this lingering laser to stun the boss, which allows us to run up his arm to break the gem on his shoulder. From here, we'll land in 2 different spots. If it's really tiny, usually Andrew spawning with you, just go left. There will be a cannon waiting for us to instantly stagger him again. Now we can reach a gem on his back and have enough time to destroy the final gem. But if we spawned in a more rectangular area with a jump pad on each far end of the screen, go right. We'll leap to the steel platform that lines up right in front of him. Just right up a few drives and this will topple him as well, which again lets us do the last bit of cleanup. For the third and final part of this fight, once we destroy all the gems, we'll be met with a massive beam. So run right and don't stop. Keep going until a cutscene plays and his health bar appears, then keep going right until you reach this certain area. What you want to do is ready up a drive, but don't jump the gun too soon because you want him to be in a certain spot. So once he faces us, that's when I start to ready these up and fire away as soon as I can. Then do it again and again. He'll most likely send out these orbs at you, but we can pop DT for that armor. Soon enough, he'll topple over. Just hold forward to reach the lowest platform. From here, we can deal as much damage as we can before we're sent back. You don't have to do anything too fancy here. You can do regular combos. You can do distortion with impact. That's always an amazing option. But if you're not too consistent with them like me, well, if you have meter to spare, swap to Gilgamesh and spam uppercut using Swordmaster. No need to charge, just toss him out as quick as possible. It does solid damage, just removing more than half that health with ease. Now no worries if you don't kill him the first time around. We'll either be put in this famous platform where all those distortion real impact clips come from, or we'll be put where we left off, which means just repeat the process until the job is done. And for the final boss, Sanctus. To me, this guy is a toned down version of the final boss of Shinobi. So he's a teleporting mage pretty much that will toss out all sorts of different magic attacks from far away. Now the reason why I say toned down is because all you have to do is stay at decent range, strafe, and jump soon as he moves. So there's no specific maneuvers you gotta do like Shinobi, and they're not as punishing either. So keep your distance, not just to react to what he does, but if you decide to run towards him and get really close, he continues to retreat over and over again. You also don't want to mash snatch over and over either, thinking you'll reach him this way, because you won't. All you have to do is be patient. Just wait for him to make the first move, and then it's our turn. Only then do you use snatch to close the gap while he's busy with that. Once you're close, just roulette spin. Those multi-hits do a great job to shatter that barrier of his. Once broken, pop DT, do combo C, launch, and the buster. Do this enough times and he'll hide away into savior. Now you don't have to do this, but if you get the timing right, you can counter that punch of his to instantly force him back out to land another punish. Yeah, pretty hype. And just keep in mind that this is possible for later. But the classic jump is more than enough to avoid it. Now we fight him again one last time in his true form, where he's more evasive and has less downtime for you to work with. But same thing, just wait for him to attack first so we can pull ourselves in to destroy the barrier. He also adds a grounded attack where he'll teleport nearby for a sneaky attack, but a simple jump and split will stun him. Thing is, if we try to attack him without his barrier, he'll most likely block with Sparta. Again, very similar to Shinobi. But just react and guard break with the buster. Then it's time to land our punish, which is the exact same as before. Pop DT, combo C, launch, and buster. After that, he'll disappear to put on another barrier, which gives us enough time to max rev. This quickly moves things along so we can keep him on the edge. Now during his DM, he has this new charge attack. And yep, Well, the Wild Place Buster, you can counter this, which is pretty damn sick, especially when they end the fight with it. And that's Devil May Cry 4. This is for longtime fans of the series, because as I replay this game, I couldn't help but notice a lot of things. I guess the starting area is kind of like DMC2 a bit, running on rooftops and fighting enemies in the streets and all that, right? But what really caught my attention was the second area. So as we leave the mines, we walk out to see this castle in the distance. They do hide it from me at first for that build-up. But when we see the castle and the moon just hanging above it, yeah, this is Devil May Cry. And if you guys still think I'm crazy for calling DMC 3D Castlevania, well, this can't make it more obvious. Anyways, once we're inside, it's basically the lobby of DMC1. Even has a colored doors on either side. From here, we need to make our way through this place by finding keys to open up more passages. And there's some familiar looking stuff here too. For starters, this bedroom is very similar to the one right before fighting Nello 1. There's even a callback to the fireball section too. Don't get reflected, but it puts the stage gimmick to use. Yeah, this entire part of the game just has a good mix of exploration and combat like 1 did. It really nails those important aspects to show what DMC is at its core. And that's, to me, is being Castlevania. This is also where we have our first dissection, and no one will be surprised to know I like them. One reason why is because it's a callback to Gunstar Heroes, which also had their dice boss rush section. So it's pretty cool how DMC continues to take notes from both Konami and Treasure. Now it's not here just for the sake of it, it's here because it plays into Nero's theme. Because the detail I never noticed till now, a lot of his moves are related to gambling, like shuffle, table hopper, high roller, roulette spin, and so on. It's pretty damn clever how they kept all that in mind when putting this together. So it makes sense as to why Nero has something like this in the first place. And interesting enough, this same train of thought was seen 1-for-1 in Cuphead, another game with clear inspirations from both Konami and Treasure. So I'm glad these ideas are still being referenced all these years later. Brought it up during the chessboard fight, but I like these sort of set pieces or encounters that are just out there. And funny enough, both of these aren't fan favorites for that exact reason, it seems. But why can't games just be fun and creative, you know? It's what made classic Konami and Treasure the best around. They made very forward-thinking action games with a lot of depth, but that didn't mean they had to limit themselves to bland encounter design to achieve that. No, instead they embraced this and made sure to put us through all sorts of different scenarios, or at least frame things in a whole new way that we didn't expect. Just bums me out, these aren't seen as this homage to the classics that they should be. Might be some deep cuts nowadays, I suppose, but being able to pick up on those references and see how they combine these ideas to get here, I think it would have been more appreciated a whole lot more. But I know I'm in my own little club on this one. For now anyways. But yeah, once we're done here, finally lowering the bridge to the next section, we go into this forest-like area. Again, like DMC1. And the comparisons don't stop because just like the first game, we have our Lost Woods equivalent. In one, we had to follow Navi, and here we had to go opposite of where the shadows fell. With how much 4 repurposes major beats from 1, I can't help but think this is a Castlevania 4 of the series, how it sort of reimagines or remakes the first game. Could be a stretch, but you know, I can't help myself. But as the level goes on, we're introduced to these disappearing panels, and I really like how they worked them into the game. So at first we're given this safe little area to see how it works, you know, nothing too crazy. But soon after, they upped the ante by having us fight Mephistos on these things. Now we're combining level design with certain enemies to create entirely new encounters. This is how you do it. And action games have been doing this since the beginning. Mega Man most famously, right? It's very subtle how they present an idea and then build off that in the next room. But that's the sort of classic action game design I always like to point out. After this, we go into the second castle, once Credo is defeated, which keeps this sort of thing going. Since the stage here is all about lasers and slowing time, we get moments to use these both in and outside of combat. We get to do some platforming with that slow-mo, kind of reminding me of the spike sections from both DMC 1 and 3. And of course, we can use this to get the upper hand in fight 2. It's great to see how all their ideas get used in a few ways like this. And this could just be me, but this part really reminded me of RE4. How we fight those knights in this circular room. We basically do the same thing here. Now, this is the point of the game where we swap to Dante and we play the game backwards. I know this is very divisive, but I never seen it as a negative. Plus, it's kind of been a staple for the series, because 1 and 3 especially where we climbed all the way to the top just to be knocked down to do it all over again, right? These games always had backtracking, reusing the same areas for the latter half of the game, so I don't see how it's a problem now, you know? To me, it's a simple but effective way to extend playtime. It's what some of the greats did, like Link to the Past, Resident Evil 2, and Symphony of the Night. But yeah, once we get to play as Dante, he starts things off with the classic escape sequence. Quick movement, a little bit of platforming, and a little bit of fighting sprinkled in there. Then we have to worry about faults that try to sneak up beneath you. So these have us stay on the move at all times. And if you get caught, then it's kind of your, well, I think you get the joke. Another stage has us clear any fight as fast as possible because poison is constantly draining our health, just like in DMC1 and DMC3. It's pretty cool that we get similar mission types to past games as we backtrack, that Nero never had to deal with. And just in general, I like how every major area of the game gets their own gimmick to change things up. These different variables do a lot to influence our decision making. Those things get us to rethink our approach, and that's very important to keep combat interesting. Because if we just fight in empty rooms over and over, they don't get stale very quick. So the difference maker to create engaging counters heavily relies on level design. And we saw that clear as day in both Shinobi and Streets of Rage 4, and there are better games for it. So not only are missions and stage layouts altered for the second half, but we get to play as a new character, which has us approach the game in an entirely new way. I mentioned this in my DMC2 video. The sort of idea of replaying the same levels with multiple different characters is very similar to beat-em-ups, or Castlevania Bloodlines, right? But yeah, this has us figure out the strengths and weaknesses of our character. Then we can form some different strategies based around their unique toolkits. Now I know many had issue with this, having to learn a new character halfway through the game, so this sudden change led to many believe Dante wasn't meant for these enemies. But if you played 1 and 3, you'll be able to pick up on a lot of the similarities as soon as you saw and fought them for the first time. I think that's pretty cool how legacy knowledge carried over like that. But even if you didn't, you had the fun of doing a bit of experimenting. Unfortunately, that wasn't the general takeaway from this moment though. But hey, it's another concept that was in 2 that had potential but wasn't fully realized. At least the later game put that dual pro tag setup to good use. And with the amount of characters we have here, with the very own mechanics and playstyles to master, the fun never ends. It's like Resident Evil 6 or Streets of Rage 4 in that way. Being this love letter to the franchise, where everyone's here for this ultimate celebration. That's why DMC4 to me is the last hurrah from the series. It brings everyone back and incorporates bits and pieces from every game that came before it, while setting up the passing of the torch. Honestly, if this was the final game we ever got, I'd be happy with that, because it truly knew what this series is about and respected the games that led up to this moment. And I couldn't ask for a better send-off than that.